Chapter 6. Can you turn off the glowworms? I'm trying to sleep. Thanks. I died. Nah, I'm just kidding. It was purple, though. Before I even had time to react, a high-pitched shriek pierced my ears. Are you kidding me? May White Wren had apparently lied about her frog. I turned along with a bunch of other people to see her actual color, and... oh, great. It was purple, too. Venner Jones and a few boys who had been following him around were laughing again, holding out their blue frogs like gold medals. My heart was racing, thrilled to be away from him and his goons, but so mad about being in the same team as May, I almost smashed my jar against the ground. She was still screaming to Tipperary about her frog. This has to be a mistake, she screamed. I'm literally the best constable here. How can I not be in Blazo? A couple of the other fire talkers I'd seen in our year were off to their side staring at her meltdown, all of their jars full of red. It's no mistake, miss, Athro Lloyd said over Tipperary, who was struggling to hide a smile. The tadpoles saw what they saw out of you this week, and they saw a perfect candidate for Kava. That's... May stopped herself. Thankfully. Otherwise, I might have to reiterate some language that I don't typically use. The look on her face said a lot of things. Anger, for one, obviously. Frustration. Embarrassment. She looked at the other red frogs of the fire talkers and turned back to her own purple one, dejected and depressed. Athro Lloyd had said there was no trading teams, and what the frogs said was final. May was so upset I wondered if she would quit the school altogether. Was that even an option? Then I remembered she had tried to burn my face off, and I stopped caring. Besides, I was in Kava too. And was I complaining? Okay. Maybe a little. After everything she and Jones had been saying about it, plus the fact that they were a leftover kind of team, plus the fact that their dormitory was across the canyon in a cave in the rock, yeah, I wasn't exactly looking forward to it. Especially since she was going to be there with me. I looked around at the other first years. The frogs were split pretty evenly between the 5 teams. Kava was a little smaller than the others. I only saw 9 purple frogs compared to the 12 red ones from Blazo. Maybe they were out of the room for May, and she was kicked over to Kava to save space. But that didn't seem right. Floyd had said the tadpoles saw what they saw in her that week, which got me wondering, what had they seen in me? Besides May and me, the other purple frogs belonged to Nelson, Riser, 2 red-headed girls who looked similar enough that I figured they were cousins, a boy named Quark, yes, Quark, who I really hadn't talked to much beyond hearing him complain about the lack of vegetarian options in the cafeteria, Kelb Macri, a boy from the Thayer Nation down on Urto who had something like 30 siblings and was surprised not to be joining a couple of his sisters in Anda, and Tatent Wallace, a girl with skin that was as red as the Blazo frogs. Adding to my disappointment, I was crushed when I saw Harbo's frog looking normal. Solid green. Thankfully, he looked disappointed too, looking down at my frog and popping his eyes between me and May. Are we still allowed to talk to each other? I asked, realizing I didn't want to have to go through the process of making a new best friend for the 3rd time that week. He smiled, though I got the feeling he was hiding some of the truth. Of course we are, he said. It's just, we might not have classes at the same time anymore. Plus you need permission to enter each other's lounges, another kid jumped in. Another boy I hadn't learned the name of, holding an orange frog in his hand. From whom? I asked, trying to sound smart using the word whom, but the answer was cut off by Athro Tipperary. All right, students, she said. Now that you've all had time to process your placements, it's time to hand you over to your gorners. Come along. Our what? I asked, turning to find Harbo again, but he had already zoomed forward to catch up with the other Anda kids. Our team leaders, a voice said over my shoulder. Don't you know anything? It was May. She bumped me hard as she walked by, joining the crowd on their way into the school. My jar fell out of my hand and shattered on the ground, letting the purple frog out to jump around in the grass. Hey! I yelled after her, but she was already at the bridge. Realizing I was the last one in the group, I leaned over to pick up my frog. Leave it, my boy, came Athro Lloyd's voice from the edge of the moat. It's good for the soil. Besides, I wouldn't touch one of those if I were you. Why? I asked, catching back up to the herd. Could it kill me? He laughed. Not exactly, he said. But the smell might take a while to get off. I was grateful for the warning, but given that I was already heading for the loser team, I didn't know if my reputation with the other 40 first years could get any worse. I tried to put that frustration out of my mind as we maneuvered through the school again, taking a route I'd never seen before. A long hotel-like hallway that was made entirely of stained glass, which patterned the floor with colors I didn't even know could exist. For a building that mostly felt like a living thing, this particular part felt way too organized and out of place. But it was easily my new favorite section of the school. Eventually, it spilled out into that big atrium area at the heart of the building, where I kid you not, hundreds of people were circled around the balconies on the upper floors. I wouldn't have thought that was weird. Heck, I was excited to meet the other students, but every single one of them was older than Athro Tipperary, and most looked older than the weird old guy who had followed us into the building. They were all dressed in different colored suits and dresses, the colors of the different teams, I realized. And as we walked out onto the floor, they all cheered and raised their wands, sending hundreds of different colored fireworks, confetti, and streamers flying over our heads. There must have been a few talkers scattered throughout the crowd too, since a combination of water, wind, fire, and even some pieces of the floor showed up to join the celebration. I couldn't help but smile. "Who are those people?" I asked, certain they weren't the older students. Reiser was the only one who heard me. He looked a bit depressed after his sister's frog came out orange, but he also had a smile on his face, seeing the crowd above us. "The Nothers," he said, before translating. "The old students." I looked up at a thick wall of black, all with bright smiles to match ours, and felt a pang of hope. Maybe my time in Kava wouldn't be so bad. Maybe someday I'd be up there with them, looking down at a whole new group of first years. Before I could picture that happy future, a series of loud voices replaced the noise of the fireworks. "Anda! This way! Blazo! Follow me! Koro! Be quick about it! Spia! You know where to go!" The last voice came from a man near the back corner of the room. A big checkerboard of black and purple floated in the air above his head like a magic flag. "Kava," he said, less enthusiastically than the other Gorners. "Present your frogs and make your way down to the greenhouses for further direction." I felt my throat swell up like like a frog, actually. Even though Floyd had told me to leave the frog behind, something about this new teacher scared me into thinking that was the wrong choice. Was he even a teacher? The man below the floating flag looked like he'd rather be anywhere else than with children, so I kind of doubted it. I didn't know what Gorner meant, but the way this man stood, with his greasy slick-back hair and condescending attitude, told me he'd be a really good politician, or maybe a CEO of a big bank or something. Most terrifying of all was his outfit, and as the 4 other teams went off in different directions, I realized every one of the Gorners was wearing the same thing, regardless of their team. A sharp black coat fastened by 5 silver buttons on the very left side, with a stand-up collar poking halfway up their necks. After the outrageous outfits Floyd and Tipperary had been rocking all week, these jackets felt depressing, almost evil. Over his right breast, the Kava Gorner wore a little silver diamond I worried he might tear off and throw at me as soon as I told him my frog was missing. It was sharp enough to do some damage, but as the line grew shorter and the other Kava first years disappeared around the corner, I realized the diamond was more than just a plain shape. It was a stylized G, and I'd seen it before on the Carnarvon during one of the Emperor's commercials. Before I had time to think of a good excuse, I reached him. "Where's your frog?" he scowled. Up close, he was even more menacing. I stuttered, struggling to avoid the symbol of the Emperor on his chest. I dropped it." "You dropped it," he repeated. I could feel my breathing get stiffer. I was worried my pants might end up like Nelson's. The glass broke," I said quickly, trying to keep my composure. "Athrochloid said to leave it in the grass." The Gorner sighed as deeply as he could. My earlier assumption was wrong. He hated kids. "Of course he did," the man growled. He looked down at a scroll in his hands. "You must be Schwabington?" I nodded. Yes, sir." He pointed toward the corner tunnel of the room where the other kids had gone. "You'll fit right in." I didn't like the way he said that, but I was too eager to have permission to leave that I didn't really care. I hurried through the corner exit before the Gorner had a chance to change his mind. Being put in Kava was one thing. Not being let in at all was not really something I wanted to see happen. After a sharp turn to the right, the hallway, which was now entirely wooden, by the way, try to explain that, split in 2 directions. Since only one of these looked like it was going down, I took that one. Thankfully, it was the right choice. After swirling down a ramp until my head was dizzy, an open triangle led into what was almost certainly the greenhouse. The other Kava kids were gathered at the base of an enormous tree, which spread out over the ceiling like a green roof, not too different from the place I'd found my wand. Big day for forests, I guess. Behind them, for as far as I could see, little stumps and tables were lined with pots of different flowers, vines, and crops, none of which I even remotely recognized. I doubted any of the classes I had attended so far would take us down here, and figured it was for one of those elective classes I overheard a few kids mentioning we could join during our second semester. I tucked myself behind Nelson and Reiser, who were looking at an older boy dressed to the nines in a dapper suit of black and purple. And I don't use the word dapper lightly. Unlike Mr. Scary upstairs, this boy's suit was adorned with purple frills and linings. Beneath his jacket, a plaid purple vest popped over a shimmering black shirt, all with a neat little purple ascot tucked around his neck to pull the whole thing together. I'd never attended a school with spirit before, but from everything I'd seen with the Nothers in the balcony, I could tell this place had a lot of it. Even the team of leftovers. When the boy spoke, his accent was thick and British, like Afro-Amagretans. "Good evening, students," he said, his voice like syrup. "It's a pleasure to meet all of you." He went around the half-circle, shaking all of our hands in turn. "My name is Melonius Chupp, and I'm the Prefectin for Kava this year. Now, I already know what some of you are wondering, so allow me to save the time. Prefectin is the term for head boy in the old language. When you all come into your fourth years here at Logeets, you'll be eligible to nominate each other for head of the class, which will give you special rights and privileges above your fellow classmates based on your good standing, good marks, and all-around notability in your class. For those majority of you in the Duin path, your sixth year will mark your nomination of Prefagin, or Fuck, to the very top honors here at the school, which provides my privilege this year. In other words, think of me as your team captain." The boy smiled, revealing a set of crooked teeth that would have made any dentist cower in fear. "Now, you've already met Lord Harrowbone upstairs, though you will very likely never see him much around the school." I breathed a sigh of relief. "And you'll meet the other heads of class as you expand your comforts within Kava. Not everything we tell you is law, but I would highly advise you not to question our authority as appointed over you during your time at Logeets. Any one of us, even those from the other teams, can dish out punishments for any wrongdoing. And trust me, a trip to Athrosinius' office is not something you want to experience this early in your time here. Now, with those introductions out of the way, a few housekeeping items. The glowworms are your friends. If you leave them alone, they will leave you alone. And remember what they say, a happy glowworm is a happy hoem." Melonius laughed at his own joke, but even those remotely aware of what he was trying to say didn't find it at all that funny. "Also, if you hear running water in the lounge, that's usually fine, but if it's quite a large amount, do let one of us know. Things are known to break from time to time. Oh, and also, remember to properly hang up your things in your wardrobes if you want them cleaned. The gnomes have a hard time distinguishing what is and isn't dirty, so do yourself a favor and let them help you out. It's what we pay them for. Now, does anyone here have any food allergies?" Before he had closed his mouth, Nelson's hand shot up faster than I'd seen him move all week. "Yes, sir," Melonius called on him. "Corb," Nelson said. "Right," Melonius nodded. "May want to avoid the coronel, then." Again, Nelson's hand shot back up, and again the head boy called on him. "Yes?" "And Geefter." "Right. Well, that one's a bit harder to avoid. We do have a table with just Hashlin Thirst, though." I had no idea what any of these words meant, but the last thing he said must have been good, because the pair of red-headed girls looked excited about it. Before they could get too excited, Nelson's hand shot up a third time. "Yes," Melonius called, clearly irritated now. "I'm also allergic to Yverlac powder." Finally, Melonius said something I understood. "I don't know what that is. It's a bonding agent they use in most thesses," Nelson said. Melonius nodded impatiently. "Right. Well, maybe it's best if you don't eat any of the food tonight," he said. "Anyone else?" No one else raised their hand, though Nelson tried his luck a fourth time. Melonius ignored him with a smile. "Perfect," he said. "Now, if you wouldn't mind, follow me." He jumped down from the wooden bench circling the base of the tree, where he disappeared in the crowd. For a sixth year, he wasn't much taller than any of us. Still, it was easy to follow everyone else, and as we walked further toward the east side of the building, I could feel a slight breeze moving through the hallway along with the smell of fresh air. A purple triangle whooshed us through to an outside hallway, which overlooked the canyon below. I stuck my head over the edge of the balcony and nearly lost my breath. I hadn't realized how far down the canyon dropped. Beneath the railing, The river continued to spiral 100 feet below, before disappearing into a cavern without any light. "Don't worry," Melonius said, noticing us looking over the edge. "The balconies are protected. You never have to fear an accident in the river." I was glad he said that. It was one thing to walk underneath the edge of the building. It's another thing to walk over the canyon on an open bridge. All of us gripped the edge as the wind whistled across the side, Melonius leading the way to another purple triangle dug into the canyon's wall. He stopped right before we reached it. "All right, everyone," he said. "Welcome to Kava." A sound louder than anything I'd ever heard pierced the triangle as soon as he walked through. As soon as I was in, my eyes adjusted to the sight. Dozens of other kids, all dressed in different combinations of purple and black, cheered as loud as they could, shooting sparks from their wands like the old folks back inside the school. The lounge was enormous. We were on a landing at the very top of the largest cave I'd ever seen, with walls and ceilings of dark gray stone lit up by purple lanterns and a gigantic glass chandelier. It reminded me of a picture I'd seen once of a big opera house lobby, with stairs cascading down to a lower floor, passing by a bunch of different tiers, all decorated with black and purple couches and chairs. Most impressive of all, though, were the worms. In addition to the lights, I almost thought I was looking up at the stars. Thousands of dangling glowworms hung from the ceiling, creating the most surreal feeling of being inside and outside at the same time. If this was my new hangout spot, suddenly I didn't feel too bad about being in Kava. I guess the feeling wasn't shared by everyone, though. As soon as she was through the door, the initial wave of shock disappeared from May's face, and everyone saw her as she pushed through the crowd on her way to the lowest level, where she must have known the tunnel on the right side led to the girls' dorms. The distraction didn't last long, though. The cheering took minutes to die down, and with the older students demanding to know who their new teammates were, Melonius used his wand to conjure the same scroll Lord Harrowbone had been reading from earlier, and introduced us all to the crowd. I saw a few boys point, and then whisper, and then nod when he announced my name. But my sense of worry disappeared as soon as a hand landed hard on my shoulder. "I was worried you were right about holding your breath," a familiar voice said. "Otherwise, you definitely struck me as one of our own." I turned to find Jordan Vanson looking down at me, holding 2 purple shells. "You're in Kava?" I asked, before realizing one of the shells was for me. Hold on. Is this Chungi?" He laughed. "Of course I am," he said. "And it's a special Kava blend. Downside of being our own thing is we don't have any foods from our nation to lean back on. Good news is we got creative." I took a bite and realized how thankful I was for exactly that. Whoever designed this Chungi, it was 10 times better than the one I'd tried on the ship. "You've got to tell me what's in this," I said, desperate to remember it for the next serving in the cafeteria. He just laughed again. "I doubt you know any of it," he said. "I've got to learn sometime," I said. "I suppose you're right," he said. "I can teach you later. Right now, let me show you around. There's a few people you should meet." It was probably 2 hours before I finally went to bed. By that point, I'd met every single person in Jordan's year, along with the other heads of class. I made sure to try the Hashland Thest the girls had been on about, which turned out to be a sort of really thick cake that crackled in my mouth like it was full of raw sugar. It certainly tasted like it. Next to that, I think I ate more in those 2 hours than I'd ever eaten in my life, and I was desperate not to wake up from this awesome dream when I put my head down on my pillow. Whatever worries I'd had about this school or this team had disappeared by the time I'd made my way to the bottom floor. The left doorway led to a zigzagging hallway lined with more purple triangles, capped off by the most bizarre bathroom I could have imagined, with toilets and faucet heads literally carved from the stone on the walls. It was more comfortable than I had expected, thankfully, but the sensation of sitting and doing my business into a rock was not something I'd ever get used to. The first door in from the lounge was the first-year dorm, which felt a lot more homey than the long room in the Croso house, which had reminded me so much of my old orphanages. This place was a tight circle, with our black beds tucked into carved niches in the walls. There were 5 of us, which made the place feel a little more purposeful. I took the bed just inside the left corner of the door, with Nelson next door to keep me company. I promised him that even if one of the other 3 tried anything, I wasn't going to let anything else happen to him in his sleep, and realized that even if I had to deal with 4 years of May Whiterun, at least I had my distance from Venner Jones. A little stand-up closet was built into the rock between our beds, and I looked inside mine to find a neat set of pinstripe pajamas, which fit me perfectly. With my back turned to the other boys, I struggled not to start crying. I'd never felt more loved in my life than I had in the past week, and especially tonight since pulling out that stupid purple frog. I didn't care about anything else. For the first time in my life, even with the little life Chauncey and I had built for ourselves in Portland, I felt like I was finally home. The mini glowworms hanging from the ceiling of my bed were a bit annoying, but once I touched my head to the pillow, I didn't care about the light. I shut my eyes and passed out into dreamless sleep.